Thanks so much, everybody, for tuning in into our webinar on how the CSRD will impact UK companies. We have myself on the call today. I'm Rafael Güller. I'm one of the co-founders at Sweep and really excited to be talking to you today. And I've got my very charming co-host with me, Adam Finch, who's a sales engineer based in our UK team as well. And so, short, quick, snappy, good session on the CSRD. So we'll talk about what is this anyways and why does it matter? What does it mean for UK businesses in particular? We're going to show you, a bit of a sneak peek on how all this will actually work in Sweep, our platform, and there's going to be time for Q&A. So again, please log your questions through the Zoom interface, and we will gather those and answer them at the end. So I think 30 minutes of presentation, 10 minutes of Q&A should get us to 40 minutes, and then you can go and get your lunches if you're not already eating it now. So very briefly, Sweep, we are a platform that streamlines your carbon and ESG data, right? And you might have, there's so much data flowing with carbon, and then there's so much with ESG, and it's a bit of a mess, I think, for a lot of companies. Now, how do you track and act on all this? And so we bring all this together in one platform, get the data in once, use it across different disclosures, and really manage the data management and also the transition to a better future. And we're doing this, with large companies. This is just a few of the businesses we work with, and a lot of them with very complex data sets, and we really help simplify the management of all that. But of course, you're all here for the CSRD, and so 2024, right, is where the CSRD starts. This is a new EU regulation that is gonna demand from approximately 50,000 companies with material business in the EU to disclose their carbon and ESG data, right? And so it starts for the year 2024. So you have to collect your data for 2024. And then in 2025, you'll have to disclose that data for 2024 year. So brand new. It's a massive, massive regulatory piece. And I think in many ways, the EU, for example, with GDPR, the data privacy laws, sort of created big shifts in how businesses deal with data. And we really think something similar is going to happen here with carbon and ESG data. And so what that means is carbon and ESG data will come under the same scope and scrutiny as financial data, right? I think as businesses, we're all used to doing financial disclosures, right? And there is, decades essentially of, experience and regulation around how companies do that and how they do it mandatory and publicly. And now the same with the CSRD is coming for carbon and ESG data. And in some ways, and I'm going to be using a bit of a cliche here, but I think particularly for CSR departments in companies, right, the teams that were looking after the sustainability, but also the social and the government. I think cliches, but they were sort of the hippies. They would do the soup kitchen tour and file a report once a year. And the other extreme, right, is the financial accountants, the disclosures on that front, and it's the really businessy types, and I think those two roles coming together. I'm not being completely serious, but it's really becoming a day-to-day business practice, right, embedded into what you as a business does. And Adam is going to take us through this in a bit more detail now. He's going to talk about the UK piece in particular. Adam, I don't know if you recognize yourself in this transition in your personal person. I'll hand it to you, please.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, so we're going to kick off with a bit of a talk about, what CSRD means for the UK and companies operating in the UK. And then we'll touch upon how Sweep sees CSRD and our approach to finding a solution to, what Raf showed is quite an interesting problem that, potentially a lot of organizations are having a bit of nervousness about at the moment. So first and foremost, what is the purpose of CSRD? The EU are obviously kind of the pioneers in this sort of more standardized sustainability reporting. And I think the goals are quite clear. The aim really is to get that better quality data that can be relied upon. And importantly, historically, I think there's lots of different reports that exist within the remit of sustainability. But what's often quite difficult is how do you compare different companies? So hopefully with this new standardized approach, we're going to be in a position where you can look at the disclosures of different companies and quite clearly differentiate and compare each one with the other. So, the report structuring is quite interesting. There's a lot of jargon going around with this, but at a very high level, you have the CSRD, which is the overall disclosure, and that's made up of 12 sections, which are called ESRS. And these sections are sector agnostic, so they apply to all types of organization, but crucially, they cover all elements of ESG. So this is not just a climate disclosure, but it's covering, kind of social and governance metrics as well. When we look at kind of the first step with regards to reporting to CSRD, it really comes with that materiality assessment. So this is a view into, what these different indicators mean with regards to not only the impact your organization has on them, but how they impact your financial well-being. And this is the double materiality assessment, which really takes this kind of sector agnostic approach and applies it very specifically to your organization. So one thing, if you already know that you're going to be approaching this, is that first step you're going to have to go down is to do an analysis of the different indicators that fall under CSRD and start that materiality assessment around which of those indicators are relevant to your organization. And we'll come on a bit later into exactly how that works. So then we need to start thinking, who is actually covered by CSRD? And there's kind of two criteria that would mean that you would need to disclose to this regulation. So the first one is that you have ownership of listed securities within EU regulated markets. So this is basically any publicly listed stocks, bonds, or derivatives that you may own as an organization. So that's one scenario. The other, which I think is probably going to be more common, is if you're a UK headquartered organization with significant operations within the EU. So that's quite a broad statement, but essentially there's kind of a few criteria that you would fall into in order to be deemed as having a significant operation. And that is that you would have 250 or more staff operating in the EU, annual revenues from the EU of over 40 million, or an EU balance sheet of over 20 million. And essentially, if you fall into two or more of these criteria, that means that you need to be thinking about disclosing to CSRD. So that's kind of a lot of the technical elements about the report itself. But I think another thing to consider, within the UK is what are the actual implications of the CSRD outside of this. So obviously, as I mentioned, the EU have really been the pioneers for this kind of standardized reporting with CSRD, but it's broadly talked about that the UK and other jurisdictions are set to follow their lead. So there's already a lot of discussion around UK government disclosure, and that being based on ISSB framework. So that's kind of similar to CSRD, but slightly different. And I think, again, this is an area where the water has potentially become quite murky around these different disclosures. And again, there's a lot of nervousness of thinking, well, we know we're going to have to do a lot of similar reporting, but essentially that means multiple sustainability reports across different jurisdictions. The dream obviously is, and what we'll come on to is, our proposed solution for this is you collect the data once and you repurpose that across multiple disclosures. And this is something which is, referred to at the moment in the sector as interoperability between disclosures. So I'm aware that EFRAC, who have kind of headed up CSRD, and ISSB are in a lot of kind of discussion as to how they can make their different disclosures kind of applicable and similar, but crucially, they are not going to be the same. So I think a really important part of the solution to this kind of disclosure scenario is finding that way of being able to deliver a single disclosure and automatically populate multiple other ones that are similar at the same time. So if we can come on to the next slide, Raf, that'd be really good. So yeah, I think the CSRD framework, I mentioned it covers off all of ESG, and this is how it looks. So yeah, obviously you kind of have the CSRD, which is the book. And as you can see here, there's 12 chapters, which are referred to as ESRS, and they cover a whole range of different ESG metrics. Now, I think a lot of the concern in the market at the moment is there's not a whole lot of understanding of what is actually behind each of these different ESRS sections. And as per everything in the sustainability world, everything seems to have a different acronym and is quite hard to engage with. But I think the crucial thing which we're trying to understand is what is the actual information that's required in order for me to be compliant and disclose correctly to CSRD. So at Sweep, the way that we are trying to think about this is as, you know, well, we're trying to create a scenario where this view that we're looking at here is more digestible. So instead of thinking about it at this very, very top level, if we think about each one of these ESRS, it's essentially a list of different data request tasks that need to be distributed within your organization or externally. So there's a few key things, I guess. There's the data that sits within your systems that you need to be bringing into this correct format, but additionally, there's that additional collaboration and the requirement to reach out to these different areas as well. So if we come on to the next slide, I'm just going to talk through exactly how we're anticipating kind of bringing the solution for this. So first and foremost, it's just worth mentioning within our tool, we're building the capabilities to not just respond to the climate change elements of CSRD, but all of the ESG elements. And the key challenge that we're trying to overcome is this data consolidation that I'm referring to. So, you know, when we look at that, it really begins with that materiality assessment I mentioned earlier. So this is that examination of the relevancy of the different metrics held within the CSRD and how they apply to your organization. Once you've applied this layer, you're then obviously looking at how to collect the data that is required for the disclosure. So we've tried to kind of break this into 3 different sections. So firstly, you have kind of the quantitative data submissions. So, you know, as a data platform, we're hoping and expecting that a lot of this information will already be sitting in Sweep. So one of the big kind of actions that we're undertaking is to be able to collect that data in a really granular way and pull that into the CSRD framework automatically. But obviously, there's other things that kind of tie into this disclosure as well. So the qualitative information that needs to be requested and also documented evidence that proves that. And I think at the moment, you know, this is where there's a bit of concern about, you know, how does that submission need to look like? What sort of questions do I need to be asking my organization? And how do I manage that? So in order to kind of approach this, we're building out standardized surveys for all of these different types of data requests, which will mean that you're going to have your quantitative data flowing into your reporting. And additionally, you're going to have the ability to send out these different qualitative data requests around your organization and welcome in that collaboration. Obviously, the aim is that that's then going to deliver a complete CSRD report. And the outputs of this are essentially the ability to, you know, track that data collection. You know, we're moving now from looking at potentially hundreds of metrics to, you know, collecting literally thousands of metrics. So having that understanding of what's been completed, whose responsibility is it to complete that, and how we're moving along altogether with our disclosure is really key. In addition, the ability to analyze these data points is still very important, both for the disclosure itself and, in terms of getting value out of the process. So we're building kind of custom analytics that can be applied to the CSRD disclosure. But most importantly, essentially, the population of this data consolidation piece that I just explained will kind of culminate in a CSRD report, which crucially is going to be fully aligned to the formatting required for the submission by the EU. So the aim from start to finish is that you can deliver that data consolidation, and that once you've done that, you're going to have a report to submit into the European Union.
Just to summarize, right, the switch to CSRD and compliance, we have streamlined data integration, right? You can connect your data systems, you can send surveys to your staff, if you need to gather data that doesn't exist yet, to your suppliers, to your investments. You can use the integration. So just get the data in, and then it flows into all the right places where you need the data, and you can work with it. It's all about promoting collaboration, right? This is a company-wide effort. Carbon and ESG needs to become a day-to-day business practice. So how can you engage all your teams? SWEEP is science-based, right? It's all based on robust methodology, whether that is the CSRD requirements or it is, how you set your science-based targets for your carbon targets, for example. And finally, really everything is built around auditability, right? Being able to dig into the data, understand how the data came into the system, who edited what, and it helps you and your teams understand. And most importantly, once you get your auditors in, they can make sure that they have sort of the path of how things happen, and they can dig into it. So yeah, that gets us to the Q&A. Adam, I'll pass on to you. Service those questions. Thanks so much.
Brilliant. Cheers, Ralph. So yeah, I'm just going to kind of work through one by one as the questions came in. So the first one is, who will be making sure companies report appropriately under the CSRD? And I think, again, I mentioned as we work through the presentation there, the role of consultants in this. I think in terms of ensuring your appliance and making sure that you're reporting appropriately to CSRD, having that consulting guidance will be really, really crucial in terms of delivering this. I think to an extent, it's still kind of unsure about what appropriate will mean, but certainly they're the best people to give you advice on that specifically. The next question was around high-risk sectors that would bring companies into scope. So are there specific high-risk sectors where you would automatically be applicable to disclose to CSRD? So I think, broadly speaking, the disclosure has been designed to be sector agnostic. So the applicability is not in regards to the quantity of emissions that you have in the EU. It's more focused on your revenue generation and the assets that you manage in that jurisdiction. One thing which is important to bear in mind, and I've mentioned that the general framework for CSRD is sector agnostic, but it's also worth bearing in mind that there's kind of sectors such as textiles, agriculture, mining, and minerals, where there's potential for additional reporting criteria. But my understanding is that's still being decided on. And I think there was another question that was kind of related to that same question. So Adam said that the ESRS indicators are still being finalized. I do understand that there are sector-specific indicators being developed by EFRAG. So yeah, the sector-specific elements are there. The ESRS indicators are not being finalized. They have been passed by law. I think there is, the potential for minor adjustments as there's still some kind of work to do with the fine detail of how that will look for the disclosure in 2025. But, what's been put out there by the EU already is pretty concrete and has been fully passed into law.
Yeah. And if I can add on that one, Adam, so clear there's things, I guess all the businesses and probably the EU need to figure out still, but the data that you need to gather in 2024, right? I think it's pretty clear what types of data you need, right? And so what I would say is, I think, and with Sweep as well, the great thing is you can start gathering that data, right? You can get it into the tool, and then you can start answering the disclosures, and again will help you generate the report. But as things change, obviously we will adjust sort of the sequence, the questionnaire, we will adjust. But the underlying thing you need is the data, and that you can get started today. And again, also that data is useful for your carbon, for your other disclosures, for your business as a whole. So yeah, I think that's the power of the flexible data platform as well, right? Where we can help you get going now. You can start building the muscle of getting the data though that you might not have yet, and then we will help you, navigate the exact disclosure requirements, and we will, obviously update the platform. Everything something changes, so you don't have to worry about it. We will take care of
that. Brilliant. So another question, which is quite interesting. Do you have any sense of the interoperability with B Corp and GRI specifically? So I think the response here is different in both cases. So B Corp itself, I would describe as a very, very different type of disclosure than what you're looking at for CSRD. So I think it is the type of information set that you're collecting will likely be similar. The alignment to CSRD is unlikely to be significant. GRI, on the other hand, is very closely aligned to the plans that have been delivered by the EU with CSRD, and also with the developments of ISSB. So you could expect there to be a lot of alignment there. One thing which is slightly frustrating with this is there will certainly be alignment, but as we found with CSRD, there will likely be differences as to how you would actually format the response and the different ways in which you would actually pull that data in. So that's likely where you would have slightly more difficulty in that regard. I don't know if you had any other points on that at all, Raf.
No, that's fair. And again, right, I mean, your greenhouse gas emissions, for example, your carbon footprint, right? You will probably report that in a greenhouse gas protocol format. You need it for your CDP disclosures if you do it, right? If you're in France, you might want to report as the bilan carbone as well. Then you need it for your CSRD. If you do your B Corp, you need to talk about your carbon emissions as well. So again, the idea is you generate the data sets, right? And you sort of approve these, and then you leverage them to do different kinds of reportings, and hopefully more and more all these different standards will align, right? But also when they're different, sort of the underlying information is probably the same, and we'll just make sure that you can leverage that again and again, sort of in the most seamless way, trying to help you, remove the friction, having to start from scratch with every single report that you do.
Brilliant. So next one, how many data points in total will be reported on? So I believe the official number is 85 indicators, which sums up to 1,100 data points. So scary numbers, but yeah, we're hoping that's exactly where like a platform like Sweep can really support in consolidating that in a more efficient way. And then is Scope 3 data fully in scope, provided it's material? Yes, Scope 3 and supply chain emissions are going to be a really core submission to CSRD. So if you're yet to start to look into your supply chain emissions and you know that you're going to be applicable to CSRD, I would advise that kind of the number one thing I'd start doing is start to measure those supply chain emissions and get a hold of that as soon as possible. And then there's quite an interesting one here, which I don't know if I could throw over to you, Raf. Do you see CSRD as a compliance topic only for companies, or is there the opportunity for value creation? And how?
Yeah, that's probably my favorite question. And that gets very much to the core of what we are building at Sweep. And Sweep is a mission-driven company. We're a B Corp and entreprise à mission, and we really believe that I mean, for starters, I think we all need regulation, right? So that we as businesses, but also as, eventually society, we have guardrails on, how we can work towards that decarbonized future. And we really believe that, carbon, for example, specifically, it is scary. It's sort of for many people, I think it's an anxious topic. And we also think it can be a catalyst for positive change too, right? There's not only the scary bits, there's also upside. And so for business, right, you might be worried about your disclosure and your risks. But we believe, and we can see that with some of our customers already, that that can be a force for positive change, right? And so you figuring out how you can be competitive in a decarbonized future means you innovate, right? You build new business for yourself. You working with your suppliers, on how you reduce your collective emissions means you building better collaboration with your suppliers, right? You getting your staff involved in this means you engage your staff on something they care about, right? So I think there's so many ways how businesses tackling their planetary impact, their societal impact, can be a force for good. We believe, for us as a planet, but also very much for them as businesses. And we call that forever companies. So I would say yes. So CSRD, I think, a very important piece of regulation to add a bit of a stick to the carrot, and to sort of level the playing field, and so all the businesses know how they should do this. And then I think it should have really good ripple effects for businesses and for us as well.
Yeah, I think to add to that, like the ability to compare is the key element here. Like, as soon as you're able to put two businesses up against each other and then say, okay, this is their performance relatively, you're moving in the direction of creating value for businesses, provided you're doing the disclosure very well, and you're walking the walk with regards to the policies you're putting in place for improvement. So yeah, lots of benefits to be had, provided it's kind of moving in the right direction. There's a question here about the sweep offering. So are you offering support with double materiality assessment within or outside of your platform? Yeah, so essentially, as I mentioned, as we ran through the slides, within the platform, you will have the ability to apply a materiality assessment into your disclosure. So you will have the ability to provide that relevancy information against each metric. What Sweep does not do, and I think it's a pretty obvious thing, because we're a platform, we're not a consultant, we're not in a position to provide you with advice or consultation around how your materiality should look, but we partner with a number of organizations that can certainly support you with that. There's a few questions kind of more broadly about the platform, which I can see here, which I think if you've asked any of those about like our deployment or about our customer base, please feel free to reach out, and we'd be more than happy to talk to you about that in another setting. But I'm going to keep the questions solidly on the CSRD topic. So there's one here, which is, does Sweep help in matching an indicator with several reporting standards? So this kind of relates back to that interoperability, which we've referenced a number of times in this presentation. And I think obviously today the discussion has been on CSRD, but more generally, the module that we're creating is called Sweep for Compliance. We're testing it out first on CSRD, but we're then going to be in a position to roll that out across these other disclosures that you've mentioned here, such as GRI, TCFD, ISSB, even things like CDP. So, the aim of this really is to ensure that you collect the data once, and then you're repurposing that same data set in different ways for these different disclosures. So feasibly, you could be in a position where you report to CSRD, and if you've done so in Sweep, you would see the percentage coverage you would have for GRI and TCFD, and potentially the areas that are missing that you would need to deliver in order to complete those disclosures as well. So it's really, really focused around making sure that this is as efficient as possible, in terms of not meaning that you need to recreate the same data sets over and over again for different reports. I don't know if you have anything to add on that at all, Raf.
No, that's correct. And I mean, we're doing that today, right? So if you have your carbon emissions in Sweep, right, that is in your greenhouse gas protocol, you might do a bilan carbone, which is a French reporting standard. And if you track your suppliers and your investments in Sweep, that data is flowing into the right places as well. And now with CSRD, when you load that module, all that data will already be in your CSRD as well. So Sweep is built as a flexible data platform, and that's really how it works today. And then, as Adam mentioned, so CSRD is next, and then we will roll out more and more of these other standards as well.
Brilliant. And there's another one here for you, actually, Raf. Do you have any idea on the formats the eventual report should look like? And is it the same as financial disclosing?
Yeah, so it's a very specific file format that you have to submit it in, right? And so I think sort of a machine readable format. I mean, imagine 50,000 companies and submissions and so many disclosures, right? So I think the EU is going to have sort of an automated system to process that data. And so you'll have to submit it in a very specific format. That was the final screen I showed you. Well, you'll be able to export that. And I think, there's some vagueness around what exactly, sort of each page, I guess, or each part in this file will be. It's probably going to be very specific and make it this table, formatted like this. And so we will take care of
that. Brilliant. So we're in time. Sorry.
That's great. I mean, there's probably a few more questions coming in, but I mean, we'll respond if you have your details. We'll respond offline. Please, get in touch, whether that's Adam and myself directly on social, but also you can just go on sweep.net. You'll find the forms to get in touch. And yeah, thanks so much for your interest. Thanks for caring about using data to build a better business, but also build a better future for all of us. And as we said earlier, our aim is to make you all forever companies. Companies that can use these regulations as a way to build a better business that can exist and thrive in a decarbonized future. And so, thanks for joining us on this journey, and have a good day.
Excellent. See you.
Bye.